You ever walk away from a conversation and feel like something was off? Maybe the other person smiled, nodded, said all the right things, but deep down, you knew they didn't really like talking to you. Now, here's the truth. Most people don't lose friends or connections because of big, dramatic moments. They lose them quietly through small habits, unnoticed patterns, little slips in how they talk and listen. And today, I'm going to expose 5 conversation habits that quietly make people dislike you, often without you even realizing it. Talking more than you listen, you might think being interesting makes people like you. But in reality, it's showing interest that does. When you dominate a conversation, even with good intentions, you make the other person feel invisible. Listening isn't waiting for your turn to speak. It's about making someone feel heard. People don't remember what you said. They remember how they felt when you listened. One-upping everything, you know that person who always has to top your story. You say, I had a long day. They say, oh, you think your day was long. Mine started at 5 a.m. They don't mean harm, but they kill connection because conversation isn't a competition. It's collaboration. If someone shares a win, celebrate them. If they share pain, acknowledge it. You don't have to match every emotion. Just be present in it, constantly turning the focus back to yourself. This one's subtle. We do it without realizing it, especially when we're trying to relate. Someone says, I've been feeling really stressed lately, and you jump in with, yeah, me too. Work has been crazy. You think you're connecting, but what you're really doing is redirecting. Instead, pause and ask a question. Really? What's been stressing you out most? That single question can transform how people feel around you. Using negative or judgmental language, words have energy. If you constantly gossip, complain, or criticize, even jokingly, people will start associating you with that negative energy. It drains them. Positivity doesn't mean pretending everything's perfect. It means you choose to focus on solutions instead of problems. Be the person who uplifts the room, not the one who quietly dims it. Failing to read the room, every conversation has a rhythm, a tone. Sometimes it's light, sometimes it's deep, and the people who fail to sense that, they lose others fast. They make jokes when it's serious, they overshare when it's not the moment, or they push too hard when someone's not ready. Social awareness isn't a gift, it's a skill. You learn it by watching faces, sensing energy, paying attention to what's not being said. Now, here's the truth. People decide how they feel about you, not in the big moments, but in the small ones. The way you nod when they talk, the questions you ask, the silence you allow, that's where connection lives or dies. So before your next conversation, ask yourself, am I trying to impress or connect? Because the people who truly win others over aren't the loudest in the room. They're the ones who make others feel heard, seen, and valued. That's real power, and it speaks louder than words ever could. Listening is one of the most underestimated skills in human interaction. People think communication is about speaking well, having the right words, confidence, or charm. But in reality, the power lies in listening. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to respond. They're simply waiting for a pause in the other person's sentence so they can jump in with their own story, their own opinion, their own point. But true connection doesn't happen when you speak. It happens when you listen with the intent to understand, not to reply. When you truly listen to someone, you're sending a silent message. You matter. You're telling them without words that their thoughts, feelings, and experiences are worth your time and attention. That single act creates trust faster than any compliment or impressive statement ever could. Think about the last time someone really listened to you. No interruptions, No glancing at their phone, no impatient nods. You walked away feeling lighter, understood, valued. That's the same gift you can give others, but it requires discipline, self-awareness, and humility. Most people underestimate how powerful silence can be. Silence makes space for the other person to express themselves more fully. It shows that you're not rushing the conversation, not trying to control it. When you pause instead of reacting immediately, it signals patience and thoughtfulness. It tells the other person that you care about their perspective more than proving your own. In contrast, when you interrupt, finish sentences, or jump in with advice too soon, you send a message that says, what I have to say is more important than what you're saying. That instantly breaks connection. Listening to connect also means observing what's behind the words. People rarely say exactly what they mean. Sometimes they speak in fragments, guarded phrases, or half-truths. But if you're paying attention, you'll catch the emotion behind their tone. The hesitation, the excitement, the frustration, the fear. That's where real understanding lies. You can't see that if your mind is busy planning your next response. The best communicators don't just hear, they feel. They tune into the emotional layer of what's being said and respond with empathy instead of ego. One of the reasons people struggle to listen is because they equate silence with weakness. They think if they're not talking, they're not adding value. But the opposite is true. The strongest person in the room is the one who can stay quiet and still command presence. Listening requires self-control, the kind that says, I don't need to prove myself right now. It's a quiet confidence that draws people in because it's rare. In a world full of noise, stillness stands out. You can test this the next time you're in a conversation. Instead of rushing to respond, ask one follow-up question. Something simple like, what made you feel that way? Or, can you tell me more about that? Watch what happens. The other person will pause, look at you differently, and open up more. Why? Because almost no one asks those questions anymore. People crave being understood, not judged or dismissed. When you give them that space, they feel safe. And people always gravitate toward those who make them feel safe. Listening also has another dimension, listening to what's not being said. Sometimes silence, hesitation, or a change in energy says more than words. Maybe the person goes quiet when a certain topic comes up. Maybe their tone drops slightly. That's where you step into emotional intelligence. Instead of pushing for answers or filling the silence, you hold space. You show patience. You let them know, I'm here if you want to talk about it. That one act can build trust that lasts for years. Listening to connect doesn't mean you agree with everything. It means you respect the other person's perspective enough to hear it fully before responding. That's maturity. When you interrupt or dismiss, it's usually because your ego wants to protect its viewpoint. But if you can set that aside and just receive, you'll be surprised at how much people open up. You may even find that your opinion changes or deepens in ways you didn't expect. Another mistake people make is pretending to listen while mentally preparing their next point. That's not listening, that's waiting to speak. When your mind is focused on what you'll say next, you're not truly present. Presence is the foundation of connection. You can't fake it. People feel when you're distracted and they'll shut down emotionally. But when you maintain eye contact, nod with genuine attention, and respond thoughtfully, you create a powerful loop of trust. The energy shifts. You move from two people talking to two people connecting. Listening is also about letting go of the need to fix. When someone shares a problem, most of us jump into solution mode. We start giving advice before they even finish. But often people don't want solutions. They want understanding. They want someone to get it. When you jump to fix things, you unintentionally dismiss their feelings. The better move is to validate first, that sounds really tough, or I can understand why you'd feel that way. Once they feel understood, then and only then are they ready to hear advice. Listening requires humility. It takes maturity to say, right now, this moment isn't about me. Every person you meet has a story that shaped them, pain they carry, dreams they chase. But you'll never know any of it if you're too busy talking. If you learn to listen with genuine curiosity, people will tell you who they really are. They'll reveal things no one else knows, because deep listening builds psychological safety, and safety is the foundation of trust. Think of relationships that fell apart not because of betrayal or conflict, but because one person felt unheard. That's how powerful listening is. People can forgive mistakes, but they rarely forgive indifference. Listening is the antidote to indifference. It bridges the gap between misunderstanding and empathy, between connection and distance. Listening to connect, not to reply, transforms every relationship, professional, personal, even casual. It shifts you from being the center of attention to being the center of trust. It's not glamorous, but it's rare, and that rarity makes it magnetic. When you master it, people will feel something different around you. A calmness, a sense that they're seen and valued without judgment. And that feeling is what keeps them coming back again and again. Conversations are not competitions, yet too many people treat them like verbal sparring matches where the goal is to win, outshine, or impress. That mindset quietly pushes others away. The truth is, connection dies the moment ego steps in. The more you try to one-up someone, to show you've done more, seen more, or know more, the less likable you become. It doesn't matter how good your story is or how right you are. When someone feels overshadowed, they disconnect. People don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel while saying it. And if every exchange feels like a battle for attention, they'll stop engaging altogether. You see this all the time. Someone shares something simple like, I finally ran 5 miles today. And the other person immediately says, oh, that's great. I used to run 10 every morning. The intention might not be bad. Maybe they're just trying to relate, but the effect is the same. It steals the spotlight. The moment becomes about you, not them. Over time, these small moments pile up, and the people around you start to feel unseen, unappreciated, or even dismissed. That's how relationships quietly deteriorate. The purpose of conversation isn't to prove your worth. It's to exchange energy, understanding, and respect. It's about collaboration, not comparison. When someone shares something about themselves, it's an invitation. They're letting you in. They're saying, here's a part of me. When you respond by trying to top that or redirect the story toward yourself, you're essentially declining that invitation. You're saying, I'm more interested in my world than yours. That kind of energy makes people pull back. The art of great conversation lies in balance. It's about creating a rhythm where both people feel heard, valued, and included. When you dominate, interrupt, or constantly shift focus to your own experience, that rhythm collapses. The other person starts to feel like their role is to feed your ego, not to share an equal exchange. And when people feel used or invisible, they don't argue. They simply stop showing up. The need to one-up others often comes from insecurity. You may not even realize you're doing it. Maybe you want to sound capable, intelligent, or experienced, but what you're really showing is a lack of confidence. Secure people don't need to prove themselves. They make space for others to shine. They know that lifting others up doesn't dim their own light. It amplifies it. When you can genuinely celebrate someone else's success, without needing to mention your own. You exude quiet strength. There's a subtle difference between relating and competing. Relating means saying something like, I know what you mean. I've felt that too. Competing means saying, that's nothing. You should have seen what I went through. The first builds empathy. The second builds distance. It's the difference between connection and comparison, and connection always wins. One of the easiest ways to shift from competition to collaboration is to ask follow-up questions instead of inserting your own story. When someone tells you about something exciting or meaningful, pause before speaking. Ask them, that's awesome. How did that feel? What made you decide to do that? It's such a simple thing, but it instantly changes the tone. Instead of fighting for attention, you're giving it, you're showing genuine interest, and that makes people feel respected. When you're able to make others feel like the main character in their own story, they naturally start to like you more. It's not manipulation. It's emotional intelligence. People crave acknowledgement more than admiration. They want to be seen, not outshined. When you're the person who gives them that gift, they'll remember you as someone who makes them feel good, even if they can't explain why. It's also important to understand that some people one-up unconsciously because that's the environment they grew up in. Maybe they were raised in spaces where being heard meant speaking louder, interrupting faster, or outdoing others. So they carry that habit into adult conversations without realizing the damage it causes. But awareness changes everything. Once you notice how often you redirect a story back to yourself, you can start to practice restraint. You can remind yourself, this isn't about me right now. The best communicators know how to balance contribution and curiosity. They share when it adds value, not just when it satisfies their ego. They use their stories to connect, not to compete. For example, if someone talks about struggling at their first job, you could share a quick moment from your own experience, but only if it's to empathize, not to one-up. Say something like, I remember how tough that can be. I felt the same way starting out. That kind of sharing builds bridges instead of walls. Listening plays a big role here too. If you're always waiting for your turn to speak, you'll miss the emotional cues that tell you when someone needs empathy more than input. Pay attention to tone, body language, and energy. Sometimes people share things because they need validation, not feedback. The moment you try to hijack that space with your own experiences, you erase theirs. But when you slow down and really listen, you'll know exactly when to speak and when to stay silent. The irony is that people who constantly try to impress others by one-upping them rarely succeed. What actually makes you impressive is your ability to make others feel important. People respect those who give them room to express themselves freely. When you allow others to shine, you become memorable, not for what you said, but for how you made them feel while saying it. In every interaction, you have a choice. You can either compete or connect. Competing means proving your worth. Connecting means recognizing theirs. Competing is about ego. Connecting is about empathy. Competing drains energy, connecting builds it. And every time you choose empathy over ego, you gain something far more valuable than attention. You gain respect. To build powerful relationships, you must understand that conversation is not a stage, it's a space to share, to listen, to exchange understanding. When that space feels safe and equal, people relax, they open up. They trust you. But when it feels like a contest, they retreat. They smile politely, but never come back emotionally. You might win the argument, but you lose the person. When you start treating conversations as collaborations, everything changes. You stop trying to dominate and start trying to discover. You approach every person as if they have something to teach you, you realize that connection is built not on how much you say, but on how much you make others feel heard. And that's when communication stops being noise and starts becoming influence. Every word you speak carries energy. It shapes how people feel around you, how they perceive you, and whether they want to stay close or quietly drift away. Most people don't realize that language is not just communication. It's vibration. The tone you use, the stories you tell, and the emotions behind your words all send out invisible signals that either uplift or drain others. You might think you're just being honest or speaking your mind, but to the people around you, your words can either be warmth or cold wind. When you constantly lean toward negativity, judgment, or complaint, that energy lingers. People may not say it out loud, but they start avoiding that weight. Nobody wants to stand under a cloud that never stops raining. Being mindful of your language doesn't mean you have to be fake or overly positive. It means you understand the impact your words have on the emotional climate around you. Every conversation is like an emotional exchange. You either deposit energy or withdraw it. When you gossip, criticize, or constantly point out what's wrong, you're withdrawing energy from the space. When you encourage, show gratitude, or express genuine curiosity, you're depositing energy back in. Over time, the people who uplift others attract deeper trust and loyalty, while those who drain others end up isolated without realizing why. Words are powerful because they reveal what's inside you. If you often use harsh, cynical, or dismissive language, it's not just about how you talk, it's about what you carry. People who speak with kindness, calmness, and confidence usually have inner peace. People who constantly complain or judge often carry unresolved frustration. That doesn't make them bad, it just shows where their focus is. But focus determines energy, and energy determines relationships. If your default mode is to find flaws in everything, that habit seeps into how others experience you. Even the most charming words can't cover up the emotional tone behind them. Your words set the temperature of every interaction. When you enter a room and speak with optimism, the energy lifts. People stand a little taller. They lean in. But when your words are coated in sarcasm or irritation, the energy drops instantly. You can feel it. Everyone can. That's why the most magnetic people aren't necessarily the loudest or most entertaining. They're the ones who make others feel lighter. They don't speak to impress, they speak to elevate. There's a kind of emotional hygiene that comes with choosing your words carefully. You start paying attention to the patterns. How often do you complain? How often do you gossip about people who aren't in the room? How often do you point out what's missing instead of what's working? These habits might feel small, but they build an invisible reputation. You become known silently as someone who either spreads peace or spreads tension. People trust those who speak with integrity because they know their words aren't careless. When you use your voice to uplift, you give others permission to do the same. Energy is contagious. A kind word, a thoughtful question, a calm tone, they ripple outward. They soften the edges of hard days. They create a sense of safety in your presence. When people feel safe around you, they open up. They share ideas, emotions, and experiences they might otherwise hide. That's how deep relationships form. Not through grand gestures, but through consistent emotional safety built by language. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. The same message can either connect or cut depending on delivery. For example, saying you could do better can sound either supportive or condescending depending on tone. Emotional intelligence begins with awareness of that tone. Before you speak, you ask yourself, what energy am I bringing into this moment? If you speak from frustration, your words carry friction. If you speak from calmness, Your words carry strength. The more aware you become of your tone, the more control you gain over the impact you have on others. There's also a quiet power in restraint. Not every thought needs to become a sentence. Sometimes the most powerful energy you can bring is silence. When someone irritates you or triggers you, your first impulse might be to react. But if you pause, breathe, and choose your words carefully, you protect your peace and theirs. That pause is what separates emotional maturity from emotional chaos. It shows that you're not controlled by the energy of the moment. You control it. Your language also reflects your mindset. People who focus on growth naturally use words that build, not break. They say things like, let's figure this out, instead of this will never work. They replace I can't with I'll try. That subtle shift changes everything. Words shape thought, and thought shapes behavior. If you speak in limitations, you think in limitations. But if you speak in possibilities, you start to see solutions where others see obstacles. That mindset doesn't just attract opportunity. It attracts people who believe in progress, not pity. Another powerful shift happens when you learn to replace criticism with curiosity. Instead of saying, that's wrong, you ask, why do you see it that way? It disarms tension instantly. It turns conflict into understanding. Curiosity has high energy. It invites exploration. Judgment has low energy. It closes the door. When you choose curiosity, you make others feel valued. You're saying, your perspective matters, even if it's different from mine. That kind of energy builds bridges instead of walls. If you want to know what kind of energy your words carry, watch people's reactions. Do they relax around you or tense up? Do they share more or shut down? People's responses are mirrors. They reflect the energy you project. When your words are filled with warmth and respect, people feel safe. When they're laced with negativity or superiority, people pull back. The body knows before the mind does. Energy also lives in self-talk. The way you speak to yourself becomes the tone you speak to others with. If you constantly criticize yourself, you'll unconsciously project that harshness outward. But if you practice compassion internally, that energy naturally extends to others. The words you feed yourself in silence determine the words you share aloud. That's why inner dialogue matters. It's the root of every conversation you have with the world. When you start choosing words that elevate rather than diminish, everything shifts. You begin to notice that people smile more around you, that conversations flow easier, that even difficult moments feel manageable. Your presence becomes associated with calmness, with clarity, with encouragement. People may not always remember your exact words, but they will always remember the energy those words carried. Your language becomes your legacy. Every sentence leaves an imprint, either light or heavy, empowering or depleting. And once you understand that, you realize that the real measure of communication isn't how much you talk, but how much light your words leave behind.